Yeah, but I want to get into like your origin story into DeFi and how you got into Frax. So like, how'd you get into like crypto and DeFi, and then how'd you find Frax?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. I faded Bitcoin from like 2016 to like I think it was like early 2018. I bought the Pico top of Bitcoin, and then I sold, and I was like, I had said it was a scam forever. I finally decided to buy, and I was like, all right, screw this. I yeah, I missed DeFi summer. And like something I also just do like professionally and like kind of on my own time is just angel investing, like in tech companies and doing VC stuff. And I forget what it was, but it was some like CE5 thing came across my email, and like I didn't appreciate that this entire like crypto had changed from like Bitcoin and a couple of coins to this entire like ecosystem of DeFi apps, and that was probably like Jan of this year, to be honest. And then I just, from there just went down a rabbit hole and like, haven't looked back, to be honest. And then with regards to Frax is like, as I was just getting into like DeFi, researching it, like one of the biggest kind of use cases that I saw was just like stable coins for a number of just like pretty straightforward reasons. Like I mentioned earlier, being able to like send money to anyone anywhere in the world like immediately without like costing a ton of money, and just so many use cases like using permissionless systems to just send a dollar to anyone. So within that, I like started like just digging into the various protocols, and with Terra, I mean, I guess one, I was like, I just really didn't want to buy someone else's like 100x plus, and so
Yeah.
like I was like, yeah, and I kind of faded it because of that. But then as I dug deeper, I was like looking into Anchor. I'm like, all right, this thing's gonna be insolvent in like 2 months, right? Like there's just no way that they can do this. And then just like the whole like I mean just the vibe that I got, I guess, on CT from like the Terra army, if you will, I was just like, yeah, this is probably not something that I want to play in at this point. Like I mean, if you can always get into like something like that, I guess, early and make money on it, but it just felt like the bubble was about to burst, if you will. And then Die, I thought, was doing like a lot of impressive stuff, but I was like, there has to be like a way to generate a dollar versus backing it with like $3 to $4 worth of assets, like to scale at an infinite level. And then like I don't know how like it was that I came across Frax, but then I came across Frax, and like it took me, I mean, to the point I was making earlier, like the docs are like incredibly dense. Like it's hard to unpack. Like it took me rereading those like probably like 4 to 5 times, plus asking questions, plus like piecing stuff together and like in multiple sittings. And then it was just like what these guys are doing is just like incredibly impressive. Like, and one of the things that I like really appreciated about it was like the on-chain transparency of everything. So like, they have their collateralization ratio plus their locked liquidity, and like, being able to like sit there and just look at the various AMOs and like the lock times and like do the math and be like, all right, this thing can't possibly depeg, and like, but they're able to get the same they're able to get some level of reflexivity out of this while generating revenues but maintaining their collateral that they can move up and down. I thought was just like a brilliant kind of like mechanism that they put in place. And then kind of the more I learned about Frax, just like the like how Sam's vision of the Trinity stack, and then ultimately like I guess the Frax roll up and like really owning these $1 trillion markets was just kind of like I think that they're probably like one of the, if not the smartest group of devs, I guess, in DeFi, and just like what they're building. Like I'm super excited to see, and I think once like the market all understands it and appreciates it, I think it's one of those coins that like definitely has some volatility like throughout, but like I'm super bullish on where Frax is going to be, our FXS, in 3 years.
Hell yeah.
That's right.
Like I love. Yeah, go ahead, Kit.
I was gonna say like I feel the same way about Frax, and it has so much going for it, and everybody. I mean, granted, the circle that I speak to is highly biased, but all of us feel like we want to max bid Frax all the time, but FXS cannot catch a bid to save his life, and it's just not a trader coin, and like I feel I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a good thing or if if pumping it would cause more people to look at it, therefore they'll dive more into the docs, they'll find the pod, and they'll educate themselves more about it. But I don't know, it feels like the best kept secret in DeFi.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it. Like, one, it's just underappreciated and the market hasn't realized it yet, so it's just like more time to accumulate. But like a second is just like, and also it's just like a marathon, not a sprint. Like you don't want to like hype it up, get too many moon boys, and then it's like a flame. It just crashes and burns. Like I'd rather take like the long path and like slowly build, like let the DeFi Trinity stack mature and like have it working, and then like when the moon boys quote unquote finally come and like the narrative's a little bit more easier to understand, then it would be like a lot better and more sustainable. So like for like price movement. But also it's just kind of like it sucks that like it can't catch a in the short term, like
In the short term.
yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it sucks that like it can't catch a bid like and whatnot. I don't know. D2 what are your thoughts?
Yeah, same here, and it's probably our respective circles. But yeah, I think one thing too. I think FXS has super deep liquidity against Frax, which obviously causes less reflexivity, I guess, in the price. But it goes both ways too. But too, like I think the market doesn't fully grasp it. Like I mentioned earlier, like it takes a lot of work to understand what they're actually doing. Um, um, and I agree that it is a marathon, not a sprint, and like we will get more time to accumulate. And I do think that like once FRX ETH is live, and that I think that will be the product or the catalyst, if you will, that will get Frax more widespread notice, just because like it should be the most kind of like liquid ETH derivative. It should have the highest yields. The ETH stake rate should go up right after the merge, and like if Frax can capture steal market share from like Lido, Rocket Pool, etc., like it should catch that like ETH beta bid that all those coins have caught.
Yeah.
But we'll see, I guess.
There's two things. Like one, you have to like work to understand Frax. Like most people, I've pretty much everyone I talk to that's super bullish Frax, like in our circles, they took the time to sit down, look at the docs, research, and they all come to the same conclusion. They all have that aha moment, and I think that's really healthy and necessary when building your community at first, because you want those people that did the work, that came to their own conclusions, and that have those iron hands for years to come. Because that's what those are the people that are your foundation, and those are the people that will be there through thick and thin. So I think it's like necessary right now. We're kind of in this like, this like dark, I guess like kind of like dark phase. Dark is in like people don't know yet, but it won't be like this forever. Like stuff like what we're doing at Flywheelpod and other things that will happen, will help get the word out there more. And the second thing is, I agree with you so much about, I agree wholeheartedly about Frax ETH. I think that will be the catalyst for for FXS to like really gain more momentum and join that cohort of like Lido and Rocket Pool. Because I was talking to somebody, and outside of like the whole curve vote incentives, like the next best thing, or if not like a better thing, possibly more sustainable thing, is Frax ETH, is that native on-chain yield. So it just is. I had an aha moment about that probably like a few months ago.
Yeah, totally. And like I think what's super interesting about not just like FRX ETH, but like just the merge, I guess, if you will, is like I think it'll bring kind of a base yield rate, like it's not like apples to apples completely, but like call it like a equivalent to like a LIBOR rate, if you will, because if you have a higher yield on staked ETH than you can get from borrowing on Aave, or just going to borrow on Aave and like use that ETH to stake to get the higher yield, until everything is based off of kind of a premium based on the risk profile to that base staking yield. And so I think it's super interesting in a sense, right? Because like Frax, with them building out that Trinity stack, they can, get those deposits that comprise like of ETH, that comprise the staked ETH, that like has that base rate that you can then use as collateral to borrow against or to like lend against, etc., and then just build this ecosystem of yield generating products around that kind of base rate that just benefits the entire FXS ecosystem.
Yeah, it's gonna be dope. It's gonna be dope, like seeing all the different, seeing all the different strategies come out, AMOs come out. Like one thing I hope for in the future, as you know, Frax matures and scales, that it's not only the core team that comes out with AMOs, but other people that come out with AMOs, and think of really creative ones. And I also talked to another friend of mine, Christian, and he had this idea of like, what if you have experimental AMOs, and if they don't perform better than that base rate, they just fold and just everything returns back into that like FRX ETH AMO.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, shout out
Yeah.
Christian from CoinFund.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff they can do,
Yeah.
man. It's again, it's coming, but we've like, yeah, we've been disappointed before, but I really believe like FRX ETH is gonna be like everyone's aha moment, and it's gonna catch a fat bid. Knock on wood.
Yeah, agreed, man. Oh, I also wanted to ask you, D24, like speaking of Frax Lend, Frax ETH, and all these like really up and coming or soon to come products, how did you research and find them and kind of be on top of it? Like, what is your methodology? Plus, you also have like, you know, a quote quote day job too, right? Like what is the secret sauce on your productivity here?
How did you write that thread? Like you broke down Frax Lend before it came out. It was so well written. We actually used it in the Frax Lend episode. Like we broke it down tweet by tweet by tweet.
Yeah, honestly, like I have like protocols I'm watching, narratives I'm watching. Like with that one thread in particular, I think like what did I do to find that information? Like I think I was like hunting around like the GitHub or something, came across the docs. Like I do that a lot, right? Like there's just so much alpha to be gleaned, like with like open like systems and stuff, and like people will post things to like GitHub repos and like things that aren't public yet, and it takes quite a while for the market to price some of this stuff in, like literally until CT starts talking about it. So it's like, you know, I just like hunt around for like whether it's like a narrative that I think is coming, and just kind of like go, like the way I like to think about things is like, okay, what are upcoming catalysts that like everybody like knows about? Then from those catalysts, like what are narratives that'll come out of those catalysts, right? Like you know, if and then from there, like whether it's like finding protocols or products within protocols that kind of fit those, that's like one approach. And then there's just like a handful of projects I'm just kind of always watching, and then, you know, seeing what like people are like watching, I guess, like different accounts are watching, and then going and just analyzing just stuff on the chain and just in GitHub and stuff like that.
Yeah, and as Kiet asked, like, what kind of method? Oh, yeah, I guess you answered it. Kiet, what was your other parts of that question?
I was thinking about like how does he manage his time across all these different narratives, right? Like he's on RB, like, you know, with that thread, and also he's on Barra Chain as well, and also obviously main chain DeFi. Like, what is the productivity like? Could you share a little bit about like your methodology on how you carry about your research? Is there a template you fill out, or how are you tracking all these narratives?
Yeah, man. It's a good question. Like, not a ton of sleep, I guess, since I've gotten into crypto, and like probably less
Welcome to the
productivity at
club.
my day job.
Welcome.
Yeah, like less productivity at work for sure. Hate to say that. And then like, yeah, tracking. Yeah, I mean, I do keep a spreadsheet for sure of like protocols up and coming, like, and then like within that, I kind of try to tag like whether like big picture narratives and then like more granular narratives, I guess. And like, so like right now, like RB for sure is one that I'm watching. Bear Chain, like you had mentioned, is another upcoming thing that I think is super exciting. I think with the merge, like you're gonna have a whole new like kind of ecosystem of like, or you're gonna have like new MEV types of applications, and like I think you're gonna have like a narrative around like permissionless, like staking stuff, like DVT technology, like making sure like Lido doesn't become too centralized, and there's just going to be a whole kind of application, a whole set of apps that'll come up around that. So I just kind of like to sit back and be like, all right, what is coming that we know about? What is going to change in the market from that? And then from that, like, where do I think that narratives will build, and like just try to figure stuff out early. And like, of course, like you can't like catch everything, and like, you can't control macro and other things that happen in the markets. But I think like just by taking a step back, I do that, and then tracking it and then managing my time. It's like, it's tough. I wish I had the answer to that, man, but I don't.
I mean, we all face that problem. Like, how do we manage our time? Like, I
Yeah.
face it all the time as well. I had one last question about Frax. I definitely want to dive into everything RB and Barachain, but what is advice that you have for Frax? Like,
Yeah, I think like it's I mean, keep shipping. Like they're like the best group of shippers like I've seen. I think some of the stuff that we had talked about earlier, like I think FXS will be like a marquee coin for like whether it's pensions that come into like, DeFi, or larger, TradFi institutions. Like FXS should be a token that they hold in their portfolios. I think that there's just some like, whether it's like, financial reporting, or like IR sort of like work streams, like, like creating like a strategic deck, like this is where we're going or whatever. Like, I'm not saying they need to do all this stuff today, but it is something to think about, because like I wouldn't want them to miss out on like the opportunity of like catching those, consistent flows. And like people underestimate like how, like if pension funds can allocate like a half a percentage point or less to DeFi, like that means that there are constant flows like in bull and bears, and you don't have these like 80% price swings, because they'll need to maintain a certain sort of position, right? Like it's huge. And I think that FXS has a real opportunity to like be like a marquee coin, I guess, in their portfolios. And like there's just probably some, pick and shovel sort of like, business practices stuff that they need to build around that. In addition, but of course, like shipping should be kind of their number one priority.
yeah. Oh, you mentioned something about pension funds and like just a constant flow of capital into markets. Can you explain that further, and like how like pension funds work?
Yeah. So like, let's say they say I want to allocate like, one percentage of this to this asset class. Like, so you have 100 million bucks, right? And like as the markets sell down, and that percentage of their portfolio becomes less than their target holdings, they'll like buy more to maintain that percentage. So that's why in like TradFi you don't see the crazy swings that like you see in DeFi. And like if you were to look at Amazon stock, like immediately after their IPO, was before, there was like a real tech allocation, I guess, in pension funds. Every like 18 months or so, they would swing like 55 to 65% in either direction, because there wasn't consistent capital to say like I want to hold X percentage of my portfolio in tech stocks. So like I mean, that's not the only reason there's volatility today, but I think as the market matures there'll be less. But once you have a consistent allocation, I think I think you'll see some of that volatility die down. If that makes
Okay,
sense.
it does. It does. That makes sense how they operate. I honestly, I never knew that. Just living, living on chain in DeFi, I never realized that's how it works. But like, that seems pretty obvious now.
Yeah,
Once you mention it.
Dave, I call that the pie chart strategy, because all these endowments, they have a pie chart, and then they dice and slice this pie chart during every quarterly or annual investment committee meeting, and they set whichever percentage they want in each of these buckets. And as the buckets, as D24 said, draw down, well, you kind of have to top it up, right? Because then, the biggest, most concern is when the U.S. equities bucket draw down, because that's a really big percentage. So when they rebalance, they have to like sell everything else just to bring that U.S. equity thing big. That's usually the biggest slice out of
Pie,
these pie chart strategies.
pie chart strategy and allocation.
Yeah, but before we move on to general DeFi, I wanted to ask D24, like, what does success look like for Frax to you?
Yeah, I think it's simple. I think it'll be super high velocity of Frax. I think Frax is the on chain the DeFi native stable coin that is used across protocols, across chain in DeFi. And like, eventually, like I know there's a lot of talk around, real world assets, etc. Like, and I think that is an opportunity, but that they probably will go after. But before that, I think it needs to not just be used in like all the farms and whatnot, but just like the highest velocity token or highest velocity stable coin within DeFi that people use as like whether it's their saving stable, their spending stable, and just by that you'll just see like much more usage of the broader FXS ecosystem, I think.
Would you call it needing to be at the center of the flywheel?
Yeah, exactly.
Plug.
Yeah. Plug. I mean, that's how Barry Fried sees Frax as the center of the flywheel, quite literally. So it's good to hear it from two people.